G'day Bodgies and Widgies and welcome back to the channel. So last week I did a full fish room tour of all of the aquariums and you guys seemed to really enjoy that video. But one of the aquariums that I got asked the most questions about was in fact my nano saltwater tank. You guys wanted to know how I'm running it, how much it costs, all the equipment, the fish, the corals, everything like that. So today we're going to do a proper deep dive into this tank and really look at everything that you should know and the things that I've learned in terms of keeping this tank. Because if you're unaware, this is the first saltwater tank I've ever had after 11 years of freshwater keeping. But before we get into this video, let's as always acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land I'm filming on, the land that you guys are watching this video on, and the amazing people that are managing the land at the moment, like our councils, park rangers, police, everyone amazing like that. You know who they are. So a massive thank you to them and a huge thank you to you. But without further ado, let's have a look at my nano saltwater aquarium. Okay, so the first thing that I think we should have a look at is the tank and the equipment that I'm running. To speed through all of that, this aquarium here is your standard 40 litre or 10 gallon glass aquarium. And it's a very sort of common and readily available tank size. To look at the actual dimensions, this is 45 centimeters long, 30 centimeters wide and 30 centimeters tall. So it's a very handy and compact aquarium. However, for a saltwater tank, I wouldn't recommend this to be the beginning tank size, purely because of the water volume. And if I was to do this differently, I would go for a 2 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot tank. But we'll touch on that in just a second. In terms of the equipment that I'm running, we've got an Aquaclear 70 hang-on back filter. In there, I have modified it a little bit to fit in 1 litre of marine pure bioballs, along with my 50 watt heater as well, set to about 25 degrees, just to make sure that the tank stays at a stable temperature, especially when I'm heading into winter. From there, there's a bit of sponge and a little bit of carbon just for mechanical filtration as well. After that, we do have a nano protein skimmer. That is a ocean-free branded protein skimmer. Then we move on to lighting. Now this was where I was experimenting a lot, because when I originally set this tank up, Korean Pet Central was kind enough to gift me a Dimax SpaceX aquarium light. Very, very fantastic light, and I did make a review on that light. The only thing is that it wasn't exactly suitable for this tank, purely because it was a little bit too big and it wasn't able to achieve the things that I was wanting it to do. So I've basically got that light in storage for a bigger saltwater tank when it eventually happens. But for the moment, I'm actually using the cheapest saltwater lights basically available online, and they are the Aster Low Mini 20 Marine Light version. I've got the link to them in the description down below for anyone that's looking into a cheap marine light. I haven't set up like a partnership program with Amazon or an affiliate link or anything of that sort, so it's just purely for your information there. But basically this light is $50 per unit, which is not exactly cheap, but for a saltwater light, it's, you know, not even comparable. But overall, I found it to be a really great light, even though it is cheap. It does have some drawbacks, which I'll explain in a proper review video that I'll do. But in terms of effectiveness, it's able to grow the LPS, the soft corals, and even some of the SPS corals that I'm experimenting in this tank as well. And they've been doing really, really good so far. So that basically sums up all the essential equipment. But then we have one piece of equipment which I would say is necessary but not exactly needed. And that is basically what we call a surface skimmer, commonly seen in freshwater planted tanks. And I'm basically just using like an eBay unbranded, unnamed skimmer. If you're looking for something a bit more reliable, just go with the Eheim 150 or 350, depending on the tank size that you have. But after looking at the equipment, let's actually have a look at the salt water that I'm actually using for this marine tank. So the salt water I'm actually mixing up myself. I do know that you can buy salt water, and it's something that I would also recommend as well, because roughly they're both the same price in terms of mixing and buying. And when I upgrade to a bigger system, I think I'm just going to buy salt water because it's far more convenient rather than having a bucket and a wave pump and a storage container and everything to mix the salt water. So just buying for me is probably going to be a bit more convenient. But the salt water the salt that I'm using to mix my salt water is in fact the Aquarium Solutions Reef Crystals. And this is the actual box or the brand that I'm using. So it's a very great quality salt water because of the fact that it contains basically a really good amount of trace elements, macro and micronutrients, and all of those supplements that coral will need to grow. And I'm not actually dosing any further supplements to this tank. I'm purely depending on the salt. And so far, based off how this saltwater tank has been doing, all of it has been great in terms of growth and the colors that the corals are displaying. So I would definitely recommend a good quality salt will make that difference. And it's just a saving of an added expense in terms of buying the supplements as well, when I know that my salt contains all the things that the coral will need. But now we can get to the fun part, which is the corals, the inverts, the rock, the fish, and to actually have a look at how I cycled this tank. I used the Dr. Tim's Uni Dose Cycling Kit. It's an amazing and easy kit to use because there's basically these vials which contain different strains and types of bacteria. And you also have like this checklist or like calendar that you can follow to see what days you need to be adding what vials and how much. And though it sounds complicated, it is so easy. And that just made this cycle happen very quickly, and it was just super convenient. In terms of the sand and rock, I did go with artificial rock and then just use some aragonite sand. The rock, I did go with the Carib Sea Life rock, I believe it was. It's already a purple rock, which apparently does have like a coating of bacteria on it. So when you add it to the tank, it then activates and makes sure that it's supplementing your cycle as well. But the other thing I actually did was added a small piece of live rock. The reason I did this is again for that biodiversity and microorganism aspect, because sure, the cycle kit may have allowed me to add 5 or so strains of bacteria, but adding a piece of live rock may have 10 strains of bacteria, which can help in breaking down and boosting that, that nitrogen cycle in the saltwater tank. And from there, it then came to adding the inverts. What I first did was adding 2 trochus snails, then a handful of Nassarius snails, and then some Ceres snails, and then some turbo snails. But what I would suggest in a narrow tank like this is avoid the trochus snails, because they are like underwater bulldozers in terms of like moving around, and especially here where you've got minimal rock work and maybe some small frags and those types of things, they actually just like knock corals off the rocks, and it's something that I'm constantly dealing with. I've tried to glue the rocks in place, the corals in place, and they still just knock it over because they are big snails. So I'd say avoid those and go for a bunch of turbo snails because they stay small. Along with that, Nassarius snails are amazing, and the Ceres snails, I honestly don't even know what they do. They just like chill in the sand, and yeah, they're basically useless. So that's based off what I've experienced. They are a bit of a scavenger, but just go with the turbos and Nassarius. It'll make your life so much better. I also do have a sand sifting starfish in here, and that thing is amazing. Since I added it into this tank, my sand has been algae free. It's constantly being churned up by this giant starfish like tunneling under the sand, and it's quite cool to watch when that guy emerges up out of the sand. And yeah, just really cool to have a starfish in the tank as well. In terms of fish, I took things very light. I originally started off with a pair of clownfish. However, as notorious as they are, one of them did jump out from the smallest gap in the tank, and I did make sure to take as much precautions as possible. However, it's inevitable that these things happen, and one of them did clear the tank. And I also do have a fire goby. This was added in a little bit later, and it was requested by my sister because she absolutely loves this fish, and wanted to make sure that I could enjoy this fish as well. When I set up a bigger tank, which I've said a lot during this video, but when I do eventually, I want to really like go all out and add like 5 or 6 fire gobies to that tank because they look absolutely amazing, and I want to see how well they would act in like a shoal or school of these fish, because yeah, just a very interesting and quirky and beautiful looking fish as well. But now we head into the corals, and it'll be the last thing we look at before we wrap up this video. But I absolutely love the coral selection that I've put into this tank. I knew that before I set up this aquarium, I wanted some amazing soft corals and LPS, because they have movement, they have color, and I know it's a thing associated with beginners, but give me a break. I love these corals, and I knew that I wanted to have a big hammer garden, some sort of showpiece coral, and I think I was able to nail it on the head with that. My showpiece coral in this tank is my big elegance coral. is thriving really well, looks beautiful, is huge, and just my favorite coral in this aquarium at the moment. We then have a big fluffy morph, we've got a Duncan coral, a few other coloured morphs as well, and then my other favourite section of the tank where we've got a whole bunch of beautiful Euphyllia species. So we've got a frog spawn, a few other species of hammers. So we've got like a mottled hammer, a toxic green, this purple hammer, and then I also do have some SPS corals which I'm testing out in this aquarium as well. A few of them being some Galaxia corals. We've got a purple plate coral. I also do have a small encrusting, almost sort of like Montipora type coral in this tank as well. I don't know the name of that, and it actually came as like a hitchhiker in this tank, but it's been thriving so far, so I really do love that species. But all the corals have been doing really great. But now it's time to wrap up this video, and I really hope you enjoyed having a look at my nano saltwater tank. I definitely am really proud and happy with the way that it has turned out. Tons of colors, all the corals are thriving, and I'm just really proud of the way that it looks. But if you do have any fish suggestions, because we are running a bit low, definitely let me know. I would prefer something a bit more oddball or different, and I am looking to possibly increase the size of this tank to a 2 foot, and that would just open up a lot more space. So if you do recommend that, also let me know. But yeah, once again, a huge thank you for watching, and please do consider subscribing to the channel as well. But as always, stay happy, stay safe, stay Aussie Australian. Bodgie and the NANO Reef tank out.